Carolyn, and I am here on behalf of the Oregon Area Council on Aging, because we're providing this program for you this afternoon. I am here to introduce Mr. James McClure, who is the guest speaker, and he is going to entertain us about the things of Atticus Finch, who had the lead role, of course, as the attorney in the movie To Kill a Mockingbird. Mr. McClure has performed that role in To Kill a Mockingbird, so he's very familiar with it. He is an actor from Wisconsin, and he does community theaters around the Midwest. So, I now introduce Mr. James McClure.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Atticus Finch.
Okay.
I believe that was my daughter Scout you heard in the motion picture they did about me. Now, the first question I would have, sitting with where you are, would be, well, you're a character in a book and motion picture. I believe it was William Shakespeare who said, "To err is human, but it takes a computer to really screw up." Well, I'm Atticus Finch from Macomb, Alabama. I am one of only 2 lawyers in town. I'm also a state senator. And up in Montgomery was where I met my wife. She was a very young thing. Children. Jem, who's now 10 years old. Scout, otherwise known as Jean Louise Finch, she's 6 now. Now, I'd like to talk to you about some events we had when a young man by the name of Tom Robinson, a Negro, was falsely accused by 2 white people. A horrible crime, taking advantage of a young girl of 19. It was clear to just about everybody that Tom was innocent. It was very clear under cross-examination that they were making it all up to cover up the fact that Tom felt sorry for her. She took the opportunity to kiss him, and he ran away as her father came to beat her up. So The reason I'm here, not to say there's not a heaven, I look forward to seeing my children and you there, hopefully not too far away, or longer, depending on your perspective. When you open a book and you watch the motion picture, when you think about me, here I am. So, let's talk about the closing argument that I gave. It was an impossible task. And as I've said often to Jim and to Scout, that real courage isn't a gun or a knife. It's not quitting when you know you don't have a chance of winning. And that was the position I was placed in. But I gave it the best try I could. Picture, if you will, the courthouse for a brief moment. In keeping with the times, the upper row was where the black folks had to sit, colored only, as the signs would say. Very hot day, crammed to the gills. The prosecutor for the state sat to the left, Tom Robinson to the right, with me next to him, the sheriff right behind. Judge Taylor simply gave me a nod, and I believe Mr. Gregory Peck was once quoted about his time on stage. Well, there's no turning back now. So let's give it a go. That you be the jury. To begin with, this case should never have come to trial. The state has not produced one iota of medical evidence that the crime Tom Robinson is accused of ever took place. It has relied instead upon the testimony of two witnesses. Witnesses whose testimony has not only been called into serious question about cross-examination, but has been flatly contradicted by the defendant. Now, there is circumstantial evidence that Mayor Layule was beaten savagely by someone who led almost exclusively with his left. Tom Robinson sits before you, having taken the oath, the only good hand he possesses, his right. I have nothing but pity in my heart for the chief witness for the state. She is a victim of cruel poverty and ignorance. But my pity does not extend so far as to her putting a man's life at stake, which she has done in an effort to get rid of her own guilt. No, I say guilt, gentlemen, for it was guilt that motivated her. She's committed no crime. She's merely broken a time-honored rule of our society, a code so severe that whoever breaks it is to be hounded from our midst as unfit to live with. She had to destroy the evidence of her offense. And what was the evidence of her offense? Tom Robinson, a human being. She had to put Tom Robinson away from her. Tom Robinson was a daily reminder of what she had done. Now, what did she do? She tempted a Negro. She was white, and she tempted a Negro. She did something that in our society is unspeakable. She kissed a black man. Not some old uncle, but a young, strong Negro man. No code mattered to her before she broke it, but it came crashing down on her afterwards. Chief witnesses for the state, with the exception of the sheriff of Macon County, have conducted themselves before you gentlemen, before this court, in the cynical confidence that their testimony would not be doubted. Confident that you gentlemen would go along with them in the assumption, the evil assumption, that all Negroes lie. All Negroes are basically immoral beings. All Negroes are not to be trusted around our women. An assumption that one associates with minds of their caliber, which in and of itself is a lie, which I do not need to point out to you. And so, quiet, humble, respectable Negro has had to pit his life against the claims of two white people. The defendant is not guilty, but somebody in this courtroom is. Gentlemen, in our country and in our courts, the courts are the great levelers. In our country and in those courts, all men are created equal. Now, I'm no idealist to believe so firmly in our courts and in our jury system. No ideal to me. That is a living, working reality. I am confident that you gentlemen will consider the evidence that you have heard, come to a decision, and restore this man to his family. In the name of God, do your duty. In the name of God, believe. Tom Robbins. Thank you. Well, that's the way I remember it anyway. Those of you who read the book, the novel by Harper Lee, or the movie, knows what happens next and how things end up. I'll leave that for you to discover. I'll remember in your memories. That people learned, if nothing else, how another man feels, or a woman, without passing judgment. Get into their skin and walk around in it. I know that even in loss, there are victories. And I sincerely hope and pray that that was. Well, I have enjoyed your kind attention, and I'm going to introduce you now to Mr. James McClure, who will tell you some interesting things. I understand there's been an anniversary of the motion picture. I might be back a little later. So thank you for coming. You've been a great jury.
Not guilty.
Not guilty, all right. It was all for naught. I am an actor. I have, as Marilyn so kind to tell you, a lot in Wisconsin and Illinois, a lot of stage theater, some radio theater. And I was chosen and cast to be Atticus Finch in the play version of T Kill A Mockingbird. Keep your fingers crossed. We'll use the theater of the mind. In the play, oh, you can see it there?
Yeah. See it on the,
All right, well,
right now the play.
Take a gander there. In the play, it goes much as the book does, more so than the film, which just had its 60th anniversary. It premiered on December the 25th, 1962. And consider the times of that movie, 1962, and that book, 1960. The book won the Pulitzer Prize. The movie won Gregory Peck an Oscar. 10 years ago, the American Film Institute voted on the top 100 heroes of all the movies. One guess who's number one? Atticus Finch, who's had a lasting effect. Civil Rights Act had yet to pass. We had in the 50s the Little Rock decision defending segregation. That same year, 1962, I believe it was when George Wallace stood at the doors of the University of Alabama, saying that none of the 5 black students that had been enrolled could attend. Robert Kennedy had sent down a assistant attorney, an assistant attorney general, who stood with the National Guard, at which point the governor backed down under protest. The Freedom Riders were just having their date with history. Freedom Riders would get on a Greyhound bus or a Trailways bus in Chicago or Baltimore or Dallas, and they'd take it to the South. But under the Jim Crow rules at that time, only blacks, only colored people could sit in the back because only whites could sit in the front. So what would happen when they got to that Mason-Dixon line that kind of separated the South in the Civil War from the North when they were debating which states would have slavery and which wouldn't, and then the secession from the Union. They had ridden all the way down, black and white, sitting together in unity. But then they found as they get to the South, the bus would stop, they'd be hauled off by the police. Terrible things happened, beatings and arrests. By this point, Martin Luther King himself had been arrested several times on his freedom marches. He had the Million Man March on Washington, where he had the famous "I Have a Dream" speech. So the movie definitely had an important place in history, and for those of us that have seen it, a place in our hearts. I like to think that I was something of a trendsetter when I portrayed Atticus Finch on the stage. Because although there has been a stage version since 1991, there's a brand new version now that came out on Broadway starring Jeff Daniels. And if you want to see it, the national touring version is going to be in Appleton, I believe, February 22nd through February 27th. It's not too far a drive. I'll need a little deepness in the pockets, I think. But I've seen it, and I would definitely recommend it to you. But I like to think I was a trendsetter. The famous speech in the movie, he wore a seersucker suit, and a white tie and a white shirt, patterned tie. And for various purposes, economic and stylistically and under the lights, I performed in this tan suit with a red patterned tie, diamond patterned striped suit. Well, lo and behold, who steps up on stage in Broadway at the Schubert Theater but Jeff Daniels wearing a tan suit, a red diamond tie, and a striped shirt. As did the actor Ed Harris, who succeeded him. You know, still in publication, still a reason that people protest. There are still schools that refuse to have it taught. Just last year, at a Wisconsin high school, they canceled performing the play at the last minute. I guess, you know, there's people with good intent on both sides of the issue, but I think it needs to be heard. And I think the movie needs to be seen. Some other things at the time period as the novel came out. February 1st, 1960, 4 African-American college students in Greensboro, North Carolina, refused to leave a Woolworth's whites-only lunch counter without being served. The Greensboro sit-in, as it came to be called, sparked similar sit-ins throughout the city and in other states. November 14th, 1960, 5 weeks before the movie came out. 6-year-old Ruby Bridges is escorted by 4 armed federal marshals as she becomes the first student to integrate William Frantz Elementary School in New Orleans. Her action inspired Norman Rockwell's painting, The Problem We All Live With, from 1964. It's wonderful work of a beautiful, happy, innocent black girl walking into school, not knowing the turbulence around there. 1961 was the Freedom Riders. And with all the violence they put up with, they're attempting to build an appreciation for the whites-only restrooms and lunch counters. Got international attention. And some of you may very well remember it these days. Now, Harper Lee pretty much went into seclusion after she wrote the book. She couldn't quite handle all the notoriety of it. But she surfaced in 1988 when a Virginia elementary school was probably among the first to say, we aren't going to use it. It's an offensive book, it's racist. And so she wrote them protesting that with her typical humor and dryness, and then ended her letter saying, I am enclosing a small sum of money for the school board to be placed for tuition in any elementary school you choose for each board member. This is her way of saying, folks, I don't think you have the idea. There she is, Harper Lee. She grew up in a town, Montgomery, that was the model for Macon, south of Montgomery. And she ended up in New York City, of all places, working as a travel agent in the late 1950s. And a couple that befriended her were of some means. So I think it was Christmas of 1958. They handed her a check. I believe it was something like $10,000. $70,000, $80,000 today. And said, do your dream. You have the next year off. And so that's what she used to sit in her New York apartment and visualize Macon in her mind. as she went into her seclusion, she granted one last radio interview, which you can hear if you go online on YouTube. And one of the things she mentions is that To Kill a Mockingbird was basically a love letter to her father. And if you think about that, that makes a lot of sense. Now, who is this little tyke who I think bears more than a passing resemblance to Harper Lee? Well, that was one of my co-stars who played Scout in the play. She was the understudy and did a great job when she got her time in the limelight. And there's yours truly. Our casting was a little different. Scout is supposed to be about 9 years old. Sometimes they'll cast 10 or 11. Deanna here, absolutely fantastic. Big girl now of 21, appearing in all kinds of plays in the Milwaukee area. She was 16. Did a fantastic job. And that too ended up predicting the new Broadway play. Because what they do is they have a grown-up Scout. She's dressed like Scout and everything else, but there she is, a 42-year-old, 40-year-old actress putting her head on the shoulder of whoever Atticus is. And now a perfect choice. They're using Richard Thomas, who you remember as John Boy from The Waltons. How about some inside information about the film? On the first day of shooting, Harper Lee was present. In the first scene, Atticus walks home to greet his children that meet him halfway. And he looked to one side and noticed a little moisture on her cheek. And it was such an excellent job on his part and on the children's part that it was a one-take special. The director said, print it, that's it, we don't need to do it again. So Mr. Peck goes over to Miss Lee and said, did I notice a little moisture on your cheek? And she said, yes. With your suit and your watch piece, the way you played it, I couldn't help noticing that you had a little pot belly, just like my daddy. Gregory Peck gained about 30 pounds from a leading man to play that part. If you think about it, it's not an action movie, it's not a romance movie, it's not a particularly fast-moving movie, but moving in the heart. The southern town that you see is essentially a set that was created on the back lot of Universal Studios. What they did was they came across, they tried to film it in the real town, but the town had changed so much that it wouldn't really do to have a Family Dollar and a Piggly Wiggly grocery store where the houses used to be. So one of the producers came across a town in California where the houses that looked exactly like the period were all set to be torn down for a freeway. They picked up all those houses. The Universal carpenter worked a little magic. Before you know it, you had a street of about a dozen homes that looked exactly like the time period you would mention, which was 1935 to 1939, depending on whether you go by the book or by the film. Gregory Peck again got the Academy Award for the role, and guess who almost got it? Two people. The first was Rock Hudson, which kind of makes sense. Tall, dark, handsome, leading man. And the other that Harper really wanted at first was Spencer Tracy. So consider that. And of course, he, on stage and on film, starred in Inherit the Wind about the Scopes monkey trial, about evolution. I think Rock would have looked great. I think Spencer would have been effective, but this part is Gregory Peck, and he knew it. When they handed him the script and he took a quick look through the novel, he immediately picked up the phone to the producer and said, "I'm your boy. I've got to do it." And so that's how he ended up doing it. Sequel or prequel? The original book, and that's the original artwork of beautiful willow tree. In fact, down where I live in Williams Bay on the western shore of Geneva Lake by Lake Geneva, there's a tree that looks exactly like this, that even has a hole in it, like in the movie where the scary neighbor Boo Radley would leave dolls and toys for the children. Well, that wasn't lost on them when they did the sequel, and has a train coming down the tracks. In the sequel, Scout is about 35 years old, and Atticus is now 75 with white hair and a bit of arthritis. Still wears his pocket watch, but also has a wristwatch for the transition. I consider it a prequel in the sense that it was her first draft. It literally was her first draft. And in it, Tom Robinson is set free, which is a little different. She based it on her father, Amasa Atticus Lee Finch, who represented a group of, I think, black brothers who were falsely accused, and he was able to get them free. But it's a sequel because of the time period when it takes place, about 20 years after the events of the first To Kill a Mockingbird. And some people like it, some people hate it. Some parts of it are very familiar, I would say. I'll read you an excerpt as we close later today. But you definitely recognize Scout, and you definitely recognize Atticus in the way she wrote it. The Denver Post says brilliant. The Washington Post says compelling. Who are we to disagree? So there's Harper herself on the back porch. And there's her dad, the real Atticus Finch. And before Gregory Peck accepted his Oscar, she gave him her dad's watch. He passed away in between the book coming out and after the start of the filming, so he never got to see it. People would ask Gregory Peck, "Did you use his watch in the film?" He said, "No, I used a prop watch. But I held it the night of the Academy Award." So maybe it brought him some luck along the way. But there they are on their porch, the real porch. A couple pictures of Gregory Peck, older, about the age that Atticus would be. Wait a minute, that's not Gregory Peck. It's him on the right, but on the left is my dad.
And you?
And that handsome young gentleman on the left, who didn't have to lose 30 pounds at that time to play the role. And my dad was Atticus Finch in every sense of the term. I would say so when he was younger, too. And he would frequently get mistaken for Gregory Peck. And my sister, my little sister, is there, and she grew up to become a lawyer. My older brother, who was born after this scene, became a lawyer. I joined the Marine Corps Reserve, hoping to be a lawyer, then realized there was no way I was going through 3 more years of school after getting through Notre Dame for college. It's just too hard. But my dad was Atticus in every sense of the term. I remember that he would give us lessons about racism. He would get very upset if there were any comments that were racially based in our home, which was in the 60s. And I believe he also lost one job. The majority of his workers were black, and he stood up to the company and the president. And they thanked him for his insights and said they would definitely consider about how to change it. And then the following day he was fired. So he was one of the first whistleblowers. And the Atticus event that I remember most about my dad, and I remember it very clearly because I went back to our little house in Kalamazoo, Michigan over the summer. And I went out to our porch. And I remember that there was one day where I was just frightened to death of thunderstorms. I would run in the house and close all the curtains. So my dad came home and invited me out onto the porch. He said, "Don't worry." He put his arm around me. That's stratus. That's a cumulus cloud. The lightning actually goes up and it comes after the rain and certain winds. Before I knew it, everything was well in the world. And I love the line in the film where she says there just wasn't anything that Atticus couldn't explain in a way that we could understand. So the film has affected me that much is that at the end I just start crying helplessly when he's seen at the end in this cardigan sweater with his arms cradled around Scout. So Gregory Peck first got the Academy Award for I believe Keys of the Kingdom. He didn't like the movie particularly. He went on to do 12 O'Clock High, about being a general in charge of a bomber squadron in World War II, and played everything from Ahab to Captain Horatio Hornblower from the Hornblower series about great Navy battles in the 1800s. The same year that this came out in 1962, he was in Cape Fear, which was just a horrendously scary movie with Robert Mitchum, where he played a lawyer that had to fight off this horrible man who just got out of prison and vowed revenge against his daughter and his wife. I had the opportunity to meet Gregory Peck in 1999. What a great experience. He was in Aurora, Illinois, at the Paramount Theater. Paramount Theaters were across the country. They were just these glorious venues, with the stars lit up and the old Italian box seats and handling 1,000, 1,200 people. And it was called A Conversation with Gregory Peck. And you got to sit and ask him questions, and he would speak about his career and would answer any of the questions that people had. So he always said that this was his favorite role, of course. But as far as what he wanted to be remembered for, he said he wanted to be remembered as being a good father and a good husband. Grew up as he was an Irish Catholic and fell in love with the stage, went to New York to pursue it. And when he got placed in one movie before Keys of the Kingdom, that was it for him. He was going to be an actor the rest of his life, and I'd say he pulled it off fairly well. So we titled ours A Visit with Atticus Finch, and I hope you enjoyed getting to meet him. If nothing else, I call it a three-dimensional version of the movie to see it performed in action. Now, as I saw him on the stage, he had some very interesting things to say. This was 1999, and he died in 2002, a short bit later. And he was asked about modern day movies as of then. And if this is not too risque to say, he did not like pictures that had a lot of sex in them. And the way he put it was, I'm no prude, but why do they have to follow the camera all the way back to the bedroom? And he got all kinds of applause. So Atticus Finch, a hero of morality, and Gregory was himself. He told a great story about his very Irish dad, who emigrated to America. He was a chemist in San Diego. And when they were traveling the country in the 50s, 1950s, and his dad was 75, 76, they pulled over to a gas station. Gregory was a little tired, so he let his dad handle the transaction after they filled up. So we went into the station, handed a credit card, those were newfangled things then, and the attendant looked at the credit card, looked up at his dad. Gregory Peck? And his dad replied, yes, but I've not been at all well lately. But it was a wonderful, wonderful evening. And I would encourage you, if you can, to see the stage play if you're able to make it to Appleton, or they have it again, because the actress who played Scout is in it. And she plays the mean old lady, Mrs. DeBose, who lived next door. And when I saw her, she just hit it out of the park. She's 69 years old now, but the really cool thing is, she retired. Nobody wanted to hire a kid with an Alabama accent in 1964. So she just stepped right back onto the stage and did the role perfectly. Well, you've been very kind. I appreciate the attention you've given me. Let me read a little bit from the last novel, and then I will give you a special close that Gregory Peck gave to his evening with us. Maybe I should throw the glasses on now. I don't know if Atticus still had the same glasses in 1955, but her dad certainly still did in 1960. She walked into the foyer of the office. That you, Jean Louise? Her father's voice frightened her. Yes, sir. Atticus walked from his office to the foyer and took down his hat and stick from the hat rack. Ready? He said. Ready, you can say ready to me. What are you that I tried, she's thinking to herself. I tried to obliterate and grind into the earth, and you say ready. I can't beat you, I can't join you. Don't you know that? They had a very stormy relationship in the book, where she was a little more advanced in racial morality than he was. And she went to him, Atticus, she said, you may be sorry, but I'm proud of you. She looked up and saw her father beaming at her. What? I said, I'm proud of you. I don't understand you. I don't understand men at all, and I never will. Well, I'd certainly hope a daughter of mine hold up her ground for what she thinks is right. Stand up to me, first of all. Jean Louise rubbed her nose. I called you some pretty grim things. That's what she told him. Atticus said, I can take anything anybody calls me so long as it's not true. You don't even know how to cuss, Jean Louise. Now tell me that doesn't sound like Atticus. They get into the car where he's going to drive her back with his arthritic hands. Atticus, ma'am, I think I love you very much. She saw her old enemy's shoulders relax, and she watched him push his hat to the back of his head. Let's go home, Scout. It's been a long day. Open the door for me. So, you'll have different feelings, but I certainly love it. All right. How did Gregory Peck end his evening, or in this case, our afternoon? With his Irish background, he told an Irish prayer. And this is how I remember it. It's kind of a derivative of "May the rose ride up to meet you." May the road rise up to meet you. May you have food and raiment, a soft pillow for your head, and may you be in heaven a half hour before the devil knows you're dead. Thank you very much. Any questions? I'll be glad to entertain as you make your way out. Thank you. Yes?
For Killing a Mockingbird, how many Oscars or Oscar nominations were there for that movie that year?
I think there was one for set decoration, and I'm pretty sure one for the producer
Oh,
and the director. It just kicked it out of the park.
I mean, they actually won or was nominated?
Excuse
They
me.
won those or were nominated?
I think production won it, the producer won it, and it was nominated for the design and artwork.
Yeah.
And I don't think the girl who played Scout, I don't think she got supporting actress, but she was nominated for it.
Oh, nice.
There's a wonderful picture of her and Gregory Peck walking down the stairs of an old Boeing 707. And she's all dressed up and he's dressed up with an
Nice.
thing like.
Yeah. One last question.
Please.
Do you have any idea how many for Gregory Peck, long career, how many Oscars he won or how many nominations he got?
I think he got, I can't tell you the number of nominations, I'd say probably at least a half dozen.
Wow.
But Keys of the Kingdom got an Oscar.
Good.
And then this was the film got an Oscar, and then this role was his Oscar.
So he won or not? And several nominations?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you know what his family consisted of?
No, please. What did his family consist of? Oh, you're asking me? I've got a pretty good idea. I was waiting for you to tell some good anecdotes. All right, I'm up here. I'll answer it. He had 3 children with his first wife. One of them went on to be a Marine Corps officer during the Vietnam War. And although Gregory Peck was very much against the Vietnam War publicly, he supported his son, saying, "I'm proud that my son went to serve his country. I'm just not too crazy about the situation he's been placed in." And then his second wife was a beautiful French girl, and they had a daughter who made a wonderful documentary about the Conversation with Gregory Peck series. And you can find that on YouTube, or you can find it in the new 60th anniversary copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, which has many inside looks at Gregory Peck and the movie, and more precise answers to your questions of all the nominations. And it's only $7 at Walmart.
What?
Look in the bargain bin. You get the movie and all the extras. Yes, sir.
I just got that 60th edition for free from the Madison Public Library.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And it says 60th on the front, and it
60th.
has him in the glasses. Yes,
I have a
ma'am.
question for you as an actor. You've probably had many parts, many roles.
Yes.
So when you see something or something offered to you, what would make you say yes and what would make you say no to a certain role? And then if you said yes, then how do you prepare? I mean, what do you do to get into the role?
Thank you. Here's how Gregory Peck would answer it.
Yeah.
At least when he was 89 years old on stage. Can you make that a two-part question? Can you ask one at a time? Because I'm afraid I'll have a senior moment. What makes me the first was what would make me want to take a part?
Yeah, if it's offered or.
You know, most actors, for whatever reason, say they love to play villains. I love playing heroes. But the last part I was in, I played very much a villain. If any of you have seen The Shawshank Redemption, the only movie you can sit and watch 3 times in a row and enjoy it each time.
Where did you play in that?
I played the head of the guards. I played the head of the guards.
Did we see you in that movie? I watched it 3 times.
You see me in that play. I'm too young to have been in the. Well, no, I guess I wasn't too young to have been in the movie.
So you weren't in the movie?
I was in a play that was held outside Lake Geneva. And so I played the mean guard, beating people around and swearing up a storm. I'm a Christian, I don't like to swear on stage, but another Christian said, hey, you're playing a part. That's what you're doing. You aren't advocating that, you're actually showing. Well, it's wrong. The way to play for a part, and I do Atticus Finch a little bit differently. They say the way you play a part, prepare for it, don't watch the movie. Peek at the book, but don't watch the movie. Horse feathers. Because Gregory Peck is Atticus Finch. I mean, there's no question about it. I think people would be disappointed. Although you can play it differently, certainly. But I put a little of his edge in there. You know, along with the hair that droops a little bit, and everything else. But the best way to prepare for a part is to just read everything you can about that period, that time. If you come across people that represent that character, that helps even more. Gregory Peck would use the mannerism that he saw Harper Lee's dad use, which was to hold on. And Mr. Peck would do this. If you watch that scene again, which I hope I've inspired you to do, you'll see him tugging at the watch. And he says the reason he did that was because it helped him kind of remember his lines and think a bit. So most people, you make up a backstory too. Even if you're a member of the crowd that doesn't say anything. The backstory is, what would this person like? What did they do? How did they end up in this situation? Or in this scene? Or in this play? So when you see somebody on stage, you're saying, boy, he's really got it, or boy, she's really hitting me right here. It's because they've thought that through. Very hard.
Have you ever played a part that you couldn't wait for it to get over?
Well, let's see.
Let me count the ways.
Before my memorization was all that good, I had a play I was in where I was the butler that did it. Until the last moment when you found out he didn't. And I was called up at the last minute. This happens in the theater. Hey, so-and-so quit. We need you right away. It's a small part. I had 3 weeks to learn just a ton of lines. So I was happy when that was over. I love the radio plays that I'm in. I do some of that dinner mystery theater too. I'm happy when those are over. That's really tough because unfortunately, unlike you guys, they don't ask a lot of questions. So you kind of have to make everything up and you kind of stare at them as they eat their chicken and mashed potatoes. So, wow, I'm impressed because I don't usually get questions. I leave that for afterwards, but let's have it. These are all great questions that everybody can enjoy.
Well, Harper Lee, the last part of the film or the story was the story about how that Mr. Ewell gets stabbed to death by like Boo, and I mean, when I watched that last scene, it was very, there was a struggle in me because, you know, he did commit a murder. And the struggle was that, again, the justice system doesn't work. Do you know what I'm saying? Because they were gonna protect the young man, which I understand.
Yeah.
But it was like, again, the justice system didn't work. You had to lie, in essence, to make it work. And so I wondered if that was actually a part of her thinking, or is it just something that
Yeah. Well, the person who played the sheriff, a wonderful actor by the name of Frank Overton, who would go on to star in Failsafe as General Bogan, and interestingly enough, the TV version of 12 O'Clock High, he played the Dean Jagger film role of Harvey Stovall. But as the sheriff, he said, if we allow the town to know the good thing that Boo Radley, the scary guy, has done, people are going to, it'd be a sin, because he's a quiet, reclusive man, and you'll wreck it. The fact that it was self-defense,
oh, okay.
it was self-defense,
He was protecting the kids.
and he was protecting the kids. I think what Frank Overton, the sheriff, says is, this man prevented a crime. So you think I'm gonna put him on trial? So yeah, Atticus hedged a little bit.
Yeah, just
So
felt.
that's the reason why. And then, yes,
All right, you can finish.
No, I
Oh.
guess.
thank you, great questions, thank you so much.
Where did Harper Lee come up with the story for this idea? Was it, I mean, we talked, we came here, my wife and I came here last week with my dad in '92, and then he went to his house, and Karen had really explained it to him, like, there's two stories going on, you know, between Tom Robinson and then this Boo character and the kids, and my dad couldn't quite get it together until Karen explained it to him. And I mean, it's kind of complicated. You know, where did she come up with this?
Here's the novel writing version of your question about motion pictures. The universal thing that most editors say to a new writer is write what you know. So she wrote what she knew, and there was a Boo Radley, a scary guy down the block.
In her own life.
In her own life. Driving up in Monroeville was the real town. Here's something else interesting, if you don't mind me digressing. The courtroom, they, of course, wanted to shoot it in the courtroom, but when they decided not to shoot anything else in the town, they went back to Los Angeles. The thing I showed you earlier was the real thing. I can't tell it apart from the stage version. It's amazing how they created that. There's a wonderful book called The Mockingbird Next Door, which talks all about her and her world at the time she was growing up, as seen with other people, and that'll give you a lot of that.
So she grew up in Alabama?
A little place called Monroeville.
In Alabama, very racist,
Mhm.
in the 30s, and there was a scary neighbor in the town somehow, and so she just kind of...
Right. And some people say the Mockingbird is a reference to Tom Robinson.
Yeah.
Again, Atticus saying that, it's a bird that does nothing but sing for pleasure.
Yeah.
And another say the Mockingbird is Boo Radley, who did nothing but save children. And it was interesting for me, my first time I lived in the South was in the 1980s as a television reporter after I left the service. And my first recollection growing up and, the whitest suburbs along and going to a college that had almost very few people of color other than, exchange students. All of a sudden I looked around and I was the only white face on the interstate and in the grocery store and walking up to the library. I said, now I get it.
Yeah.
How scary it must be. And these people are nice. It's really not scary at all.
Right.
But imagine all the horrible things.
Yeah.
As part of my preparation, I called up another Atticus in my life. Sound familiar? He was a state senator.
Feingold.
And this is in Virginia.
Oh.
And I witnessed a murder trial that he did in a courthouse that looked, it was near Colonial Williamsburg, in a courthouse that everybody's mopping their brow and everything else. And in his closing argument, sounded very much like Atticus at the dinner table. I think you'll recognize it. Ted Morrison was his name. And I called him up about 5 years ago, getting ready for my part. And he said, well, Atticus isn't on Facebook very much. Would you mind calling me? So I called him up. And here was the story. When he got his first gun, they played in the backyard and everything else. But he fired it by mistake, and all the pellets went into his dad's arm.
Oh my God.
So while they were having their nice summer dinners,
Oh.
over about 10 years, one would pop out.
Oh.
And his dad would very dryly pick it up and say, that's from a gun that was never fired.
Oh.
That's from a gun that was safe.
Oh.
So there was a little bit of
Oh
Atticus
my
there.
goodness.
Well, yes,
Last question.
yes.
So we took How to Kill a Mockingbird to be Boo. That Atticus says in the beginning that the mockingbird, everything else, all the other birds are problems. Boo, the mockingbird just sings and it's harmless. And we took it that that was Boo, and that to not take him to court, not try him was the
Would be
question
to harm the
of
mockingbird.
how to kill a mockingbird. To take him to court would have killed him.
Mhm. Yeah, it's evenly split, and she never addressed it.
Oh, no.
So we'll never know.
Okay.
As I close, one last bit of trivia, something I noticed that's never been remarked upon. They play that wonderful music at the
Yeah.
end as she takes Boo home and then walks home herself to Atticus and sits down on his lap and puts her arm, my dad always did that too, put his arm around her, and they watched Jem, who had been injured in the fight. If you listen to the closing song, the last two notes are a mockingbird singing.
Wow.
You hear two tweets,
I'm gonna have to
so I don't know if that solves it at all. Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.